Sign here, Mr. Pierce. Nathan Pierce heard the pen click like a starter pistol. The ballroom of Ashford Tower didn't feel like a room. It felt like a throat, glass walls, steel ribs, and air that tasted faintly of money and cold champagne. Outside, London hung under a slate sky. Inside, every laugh was measured. Every handshake was a deal pretending to be a greeting. Nathan sat at the center table with his shoulders squared and his smile practiced. He wore a midnight suit that cost more than his first car. Beside him, Graham Ashford, his boss, his kingmaker, spoke to a circle of investors with the calm certainty of a man who had never once been told no. A camera light blinked. A journalist leaned in. Someone whispered, "Rising star." Nathan kept his eyes on the contract folder stamped with a silver crest. Monroe Dominion Group, MDG. The partner that would make Pierce and Vale Capital real. Not just a hungry boutique firm, a name that could sit at the same table as banks and governments and never apologize for it. Nathan's fingers tightened around the pen. In the back of his mind, a memory tried to surface. Rain on a doorstep, a woman's shaking hands, the thin cry of a newborn. He pushed it down like you push down a cigarette ember with your heel. Graham's voice cut through the room. "Our counterparts from MDG are honored guests today. Their chairwoman insisted on attending personally." A ripple moved through the crowd. Nathan's heart lifted. Personally. This wasn't just a contract, it was a coronation. Then the doors at the far end opened. Not wide, not dramatic, just enough. And the room, this throat of glass and steel, stopped breathing. A woman stepped in like she belonged to the building's foundations. Black coat, simple lines, no jewelry that screamed, only a thin gold ring on one finger catching the light like a secret. Behind her, a quiet wall of people, legal counsel in dark suits, security with earpieces, a man with silver hair and posture like a blade sheathed. The woman's eyes found Nathan instantly, and held. The crowd didn't recognize her right away, but Nathan did, because you never forget the face you once believed you could throw away. Her voice was calm, almost gentle. "Stop the signing." The cameras hesitated, as if even lenses knew they were not supposed to capture this moment. Graham Ashford frowned. "Excuse me?" The woman laid a slim folder on the table between them. Her nails were short, practical. A mother's hands, not a socialite's. "I'm Claire Monroe," she said, "chairwoman of Monroe Dominion Group." Nathan's pen slipped from his fingers and rolled, slow and loud, across the polished table. Claire's gaze didn't flicker. "MDG is withdrawing," she continued, soft as snowfall. "Effective immediately." A murmur surged. Graham's face tightened, the first crack in a marble statue. Nathan's chest caved inward like the floor had dropped. Claire leaned in just slightly, enough for Nathan alone to hear the next words. "And Nathan?" Her breath smelled faintly of winter air. "You were right about one thing." His throat made a sound that wasn't a word. Claire's eyes lowered to the contract folder, to the signature line waiting like an open grave. "You said I'd be nothing without you." She lifted her gaze. "Let's see what you are without me." A beat, a silence that made every expensive watch in the room feel too loud. Then Claire straightened. She turned to her legal team with the smallest nod. And the real machinery of power, quiet, invisible, unstoppable, began to move. But this story doesn't begin here. It begins months earlier, on a night when the sky itself seemed angry, on a doorstep slick with rain, on a moment that looked small to the world, and was everything to one woman holding a newborn against her chest. The storm didn't knock, it slammed. Rain hit the townhouse windows like thrown gravel. Wind curled around the corners of the building, searching for cracks, for weaknesses. The streetlights outside blurred into trembling halos. Inside, the air smelled of something sharp, cologne, heat, and cruelty freshly spoken. Claire stood in the hallway with Rosie bundled against her. The baby was so new she still had that soft, startled way of breathing, like she hadn't accepted the world was real yet. Claire's hair clung to her cheeks. She hadn't even put on proper shoes. Just slippers. The kind you wear when you think you're safe. Nathan held her suitcase by 2 fingers as if it might stain him. His eyes were bright with a kind of impatience that didn't belong in a home. "Don't make this harder," he said, voice flat. "You know what this is." Claire's mouth opened, closed. Her brain had not caught up with the shape of the moment. "Nathan, Rosie is... she's 3 weeks old." He didn't look at the baby, not even once. "That's not my problem," he said. "You made choices." Claire's fingers tightened around the blanket. Rosie's tiny fist caught the edge of Claire's sweater and held on like instinct knew what adults refused to admit. Nathan set the suitcase down in the doorway, blocking it like a boundary line. Then he leaned closer, his voice dropping into something almost conversational. "You were useful," he said. "You were sweet, quiet. You didn't ask for much." Claire stared at him, trying to find the man who had once kissed her forehead in kitchens at midnight. Trying to find the man who had held her hand during labor, trembling like he was the one in pain. All she saw was a stranger wearing Nathan's face. "But now," he continued, "now you're weight, you're noise, you're a problem I can't afford." Lightning lit the hallway for a split second, turning the framed photos on the wall into pale ghosts. Wedding day smiles, vacations, a hand resting on Claire's pregnant belly. Nathan's gaze moved past them like they were advertisements for a product he'd stopped buying. "You can't do this," Claire whispered. "We're a family." Nathan laughed, short, mirthless. "A family doesn't get me into Ashford's circle," he said. Claire froze. Ashford. Graham Ashford, Nathan's boss. The man whose name opened doors. The man who invited certain people to certain rooms where the real decisions were made. Rooms without windows, without recordings, without mercy. And Sienna Ashford, the boss's daughter. The rumor that had been floating around the office like perfume. Sienna's interest in Nathan Pierce. Sienna's smile at corporate events. Sienna's hand lingering on his arm too long. Claire's voice shook. "So that's what this is." Nathan's expression didn't change. "It's what it has to be." He reached for the door. Claire moved forward instinctively like a mother animal protecting her young. "Nathan, please, don't do this to us." He paused, hand on the handle. Then he turned his head slightly and his eyes, cold, calculating, landed on her like a verdict. "You think you're someone," he said. "You think you matter because I picked you?" Claire's stomach tightened. Nathan's lips curled, not quite a smile. "You're nothing without me," he said. "And when you're out there begging for help, remember you had a chance to stay quiet and be grateful." The words hit harder than the storm. Claire's throat burned. "I never asked you for—" "You asked for my time," he snapped. "My attention, my patience. You asked me to be domestic." He said the word like it was an insult. "I'm not built for that," he said. "I'm built for elevation." He opened the door. The storm rushed in, hungry. Rain sprayed the threshold immediately, as if the night had been waiting. Claire took one step forward into the cold and felt it steal her breath. Rosie whimpered, tiny and fragile, and Claire tucked her closer, her body becoming a shield. Nathan stepped back inside, his hand tightened on the doorframe. "You'll manage," he said, already turning away, already mentally erasing her. Claire stood on the step, drenched in seconds. And then the door closed. Not slowly, not with hesitation. It shut like a final decision. The latch clicked. And that sound, small, mechanical, became the beginning of everything. Outside, Claire's slippers soaked through. Her knees trembled. Rosie's cry rose for the first time, high and thin, as if she understood what her father had done, even if she didn't know the word for it. Claire looked up at the dark windows, at the warm glow inside, and for a few seconds she couldn't move, because shock isn't loud. Shock is quiet. Shock is the moment you realize your life has been ripped down to bone, and you still have to breathe. Then, somewhere behind her, a car slowed. Headlights cut through the rain. A figure stepped out holding an umbrella that immediately fought the wind like a fragile thing. A man's voice called her name, soft, certain. "Miss Claire?" Claire turned, blinking rain from her eyes. The man approached with careful speed, as if the world might break her if he moved too quickly. Silver hair, dark coat, a face lined with time and loyalty. She knew him, even in the rain, even after years. "Mr. Alden?" she whispered. He stopped in front of her, eyes scanning her drenched body, the baby, the suitcase in the doorway like evidence. His jaw tightened, not with anger, but with something deeper. Respect, grief, resolve. "I've been looking for you," he said quietly. "For weeks." Claire shook her head. No, why?" Mr. Alden's gaze flicked to the townhouse door, then back to her. "Because your father is gone," he said, "and because Monroe Dominion Group needs its heir." The words struck Claire so hard she almost staggered. Her father, gone, and the name she had hidden like a shameful secret, Monroe, spoken out loud in the rain like a key turning in a lock. Claire's lips parted, but no sound came. "Mr." Alden leaned closer, sheltering them with his body against the wind. "And because," he added, voice lower now, "there are people who will come for what is yours the moment they realize you're unprotected." Claire's blood ran cold, not because of the storm, because of the truth behind his eyes. This wasn't just inheritance, this was power, and power always had predators. Claire Monroe had spent her whole life learning how to disappear. Not because she was weak, because she was tired. Tired of eyes that glittered when they saw her last name. Tired of invitations that came with conditions. Tired of men who spoke to her like she was a bank account with a pulse. Her father, Harrison Monroe, had built MDG like a fortress. Banking, logistics, private equity, holdings in infrastructure that quietly kept cities alive. People thought of MDG as a company. In certain rooms, MDG was referred to as an ecosystem, a network, a lever. And Harrison had raised Claire to understand that wealth wasn't the point. Influence was. "Money buys things," he used to tell her, voice soft in their library that smelled of leather and old paper. "Influence buys outcomes." Claire had nodded, obedient, but inside her chest there had been a different hunger. She wanted to be seen as Claire, not Monroe. So when she met Nathan Pierce, a bright-eyed analyst with ambition in his bones, he felt safe. He didn't know her name, not at first. She had introduced herself at a charity event under her mother's maiden name, simple and ordinary. She wore a cheap dress, nothing memorable. She smiled carefully. Nathan had spoken to her without calculation. He had looked at her like she was interesting, not profitable. She fell in love with that. Or she fell in love with the idea of it. Because love, when you've grown up surrounded by bargains, feels like a miracle. Claire never told him the truth. Not because she wanted to trick him, because she wanted to test reality. If he loved her without knowing the empire behind her, then it was real. And for a while, it seemed real. Nathan brought her coffee when she studied late. He kissed her knuckles and told her she was stronger than she knew. He laughed with her in small apartments, far from the marble halls of Monroe life. When he proposed, he did it with shaking hands like he couldn't believe she might say yes. Claire said yes, and she thought she had won. Then her father's health worsened quietly. Hospitals, specialists, private flights, closed doors. Mr. Alden's concerned gaze. Claire tried to go to him, but Harrison insisted she build her own life. "Be happy," he told her, pale in bed, voice barely above a whisper. "Don't let my world swallow you." Claire listened. She focused on her marriage, on the baby growing inside her, on the hope that her child would be raised in something that felt like warmth, not strategy. Then came the night Nathan closed the door, and Mr. Alden standing in the rain with the words that changed everything. "Your father is gone." Grief hit Claire like a second storm. It stole her breath, bent her spine. Her father, stern, distant at times but steady, was gone. And her body, still healing from childbirth, still raw with hormones and pain, tried to hold grief and betrayal and fear all at once. Mr. Alden guided her to the car. The interior smelled of clean leather and peppermint, his scent always. Safe. He placed his coat around her shoulders without asking. The gesture was old-fashioned, almost tender. Claire stared at her hands in her lap. She saw the thin gold ring Nathan had slid onto her finger. She should have taken it off. She didn't. Not yet. Because the heart is slow to accept what the mind already knows. The car drove through London's wet streets, past pubs glowing warm, past strangers laughing under umbrellas. Ordinary life continued around her like an insult. Finally, Claire whispered, "If my father is gone, why did no one tell me?" Mr. Alden's eyes met hers in the mirror. "Because your father's passing wasn't merely a death," he said. "It was a signal." Claire frowned, confusion sharpening into fear. A signal to whom? Mr. Alden didn't answer immediately. He turned onto a quieter road. The city thinned. Trees appeared like dark silhouettes. Then he spoke, voice low. "To people who believe Monroe Dominion should belong to them." Claire's skin prickled. She had heard her father's warnings years ago, spoken in half-sentences. Competitors, partners, cousins who smiled too widely, board members with hunger behind polite eyes. But she had never felt it as real. Until now. "Mr." Alden continued, "Your father kept the wolves at bay because they feared him. They respected him. They owed him." His hands tightened on the steering wheel. "They don't owe you," he said. "Not yet." Claire looked down at Rosie, asleep against her chest. So small, so trusting. Claire's voice broke. I can't do this. I just wanted a family." Mr. Alden's face softened. "I know," he said, "and that is why you must do this." He paused, then added something that sounded less like advice and more like a rule of survival. "Because the people who take power from women like you, they don't stop at the company." Claire swallowed. The car rolled through iron gates that opened without question, and as they climbed the long drive toward an estate hidden behind trees, Claire felt the air change. This wasn't a home. This was a fortress dressed as elegance. Lights glowed in tall windows. Security moved like shadows. Cameras watched without being obvious. The Monroe estate. Claire hadn't been here in years. When the car stopped, the front doors opened before Mr. Alden even touched the horn. Staff stood ready, silent, trained. And in that moment, Claire realized something terrifying. She had been trying to live in a world where love was enough. But she had been born into a world where love was a vulnerability. Mr. Alden opened her door, offered his hand. Claire stepped out. Rain misted her face. She looked up at the estate, at the stone, the pillars, the quiet confidence of old money. Her grief sharpened into something else. Not vengeance, not yet, but clarity. If Nathan had thrown her into the storm, then she would learn to become the storm. Not loud, not reckless. A storm doesn't scream, a storm moves. The first Monroe board meeting Claire attended wasn't held in a conference room. It was held in a library. No screens, no catered lunch, no friendly small talk. Just heavy curtains, thick carpet, and the weight of people who understood how the world actually worked. They called it the Dominion Council. Not officially, of course. Officially, it was a strategic oversight committee. But the way Mr. Alden said the words Dominion Council made it sound like a title passed down with blood. There were 6 people in the room. 3 board members Claire recognized from childhood photographs, faces that had hovered in the background of her father's life like expensive furniture. 2 were strangers, and 1 sat in the corner, not at the table. A woman in a charcoal suit, hair pulled tight, eyes that didn't blink often. Mr. Alden leaned toward Claire and murmured, "That is Mrs. Blackwood, head of internal intelligence." Claire's stomach tightened. "Internal intelligence?" she whispered. Mr. Alden's expression didn't change. Monroe Dominion is not only a company, he said. It is a target. Claire's chair felt suddenly too hard, too exposed. The meeting began without ceremony. A board member, an older man with a voice like sandpaper, spoke first. Harrison's will is clear, he said. Claire is sole heir, chairwoman in full. Claire saw the faint disappointment in several eyes. Not disbelief, disappointment, like they had been hoping for a loophole. Then the stranger on the left spoke. Younger, smooth, dangerous in the way polished knives are dangerous. Congratulations, Ms. Monroe, he said. Your timing is challenging. Claire held his gaze. My timing? He smiled faintly. Your father's death has created movement. Competitors are circling. Regulators are watching. Partners are testing boundaries. And enemies? Claire asked. His smile didn't change. Enemies, too, he said. Ms. Blackwood spoke next, voice quiet and precise. There's another concern, she said. Your personal life. Claire felt heat rise in her throat. Mr. Alden's hand rested lightly on the back of her chair, grounding her. Mrs. Blackwood continued. Your husband has ties to Ashford interests. Ashford's circle is aggressive. Claire's jaw tightened. So my husband is a security risk, she said. Ms. Blackwood nodded once. Your husband is a pressure point. The old man cleared his throat. We should advise immediate separation. Claire's fingers curled in her lap. We already separated, she said. He threw me out. A pause, not sympathy, assessment. The younger board member leaned forward slightly. Then we advise containment, he said. He must not realize who you are until we decide the optimal moment. Claire's eyes narrowed. You want me to hide? Not hide, Ms. Blackwood corrected. Position. Mr. Alden's voice was softer now, meant only for Claire. This is what your father did, he murmured. He let people underestimate him until the moment it mattered. Claire stared at the table, at the faces, at the lack of comfort. She thought of Rosie's tiny fingers gripping her sweater. She thought of Nathan's words, "You're nothing without me." And she felt something settle inside her, heavy, still, determined. Fine, she said. The room quieted. Claire lifted her chin. We position, she agreed, but we do it my way. The old man raised a brow. And what is your way, Ms. Monroe? Claire took a slow breath. My way doesn't waste power on noise, she said. We don't lash out. We don't threaten. We don't chase. She looked around the room, eyes steady. We let him build his tower, she said. And when it's tall enough, we remove the foundation. Ms. Blackwood's eyes gleamed, almost approving. Mr. Alden's mouth tightened, pride and worry mixed. Over the next weeks, Claire learned how underground power really worked. It wasn't men in dark rooms rubbing hands together. It was contracts that quietly changed outcomes. It was journalists who received certain documents at certain times. It was regulators who suddenly decided to take a closer look. It was donors who withdrew support without explanation. It was invitations revoked. It was bank accounts frozen, not by force, but by compliance. Ms. Blackwood taught Claire the language, risk profile, reputational exposure, regulatory trigger, leverage. She also taught her silence. The louder you are, Ms. Blackwood said one night as they stood on a balcony overlooking the estate grounds, the more predictable you become. Claire rocked Rosie gently, humming under her breath, a lullaby her mother had once sung. And if I stay quiet? Claire asked. Ms. Blackwood's eyes stayed on the darkness beyond the trees. Then people will make their own assumptions, she said, and you can use those assumptions as weapons. While Claire rebuilt herself in the Monroe Fortress, Nathan Pierce rebuilt himself in a different world. A world of glass towers and private clubs. A world where the real promises weren't spoken aloud. Nathan moved into a new apartment in Canary Wharf. High floor, clean lines, no baby toys, no soft blankets. He told himself the emptiness was freedom. Graham Ashford rewarded him for his focus. Nathan was invited to the Ashford Circle, an old money club where the carpet was thick enough to swallow footsteps, and the walls held secrets better than vaults. In that club, Nathan met men who didn't introduce themselves with job titles. They introduced themselves with influence. One night, Nathan sat at a back table with Graham and two strangers. A waiter poured whiskey without asking. Graham spoke casually. "Pierce is our future," he said. "He knows how to cut what slows him down." Nathan smiled, the compliment warming him like liquor. A stranger with a scar near his mouth studied Nathan. "You ever wonder how people fall?" the stranger asked softly. Nathan shrugged. "They make mistakes." The stranger's smile was thin. "No," he said. "They get nudged." Nathan didn't understand then, but Claire did, because Miss Blackwood placed a file on Claire's desk 3 months after the storm. Inside were photographs. Nathan at the Ashford Circle. Nathan speaking to the scarred stranger. Nathan signing something in a hallway. "Who is he?" Claire asked, voice tight. Ms. Blackwood's answer was simple. "A fixer," she said. "Ashford's." Claire's hand tightened on the file. Nathan wasn't just chasing a promotion, he had stepped into a machine, and machines didn't care who they crushed. The contract Nathan was chasing, the MDG partnership, wasn't only about money. It was about access. MDG controlled logistical arteries, financial pipelines, infrastructure holdings, the kind of control that made politicians polite and competitors nervous. Graham Ashford wanted to plug his empire into Monroe Dominion's grid, and Nathan, arrogant and hungry, believed he was the one holding the wire. Claire watched from the shadows as Nathan rose, his name appearing in articles, his face in photos beside Sienna Ashford. Sienna, beautiful, composed, her smile sharp enough to cut glass, stood at his side like a trophy and a threat. Claire didn't flinch. She didn't scream. She didn't post anything online. She did what her father would have done. She prepared. Ms. Blackwood's team mapped Nathan's pressure points. Not emotional ones, financial ones. They found the loans Nathan had taken to look wealthy enough for Sienna's world. They found the consulting fees that weren't consulting. They found a junior colleague's complaint buried by HR, paid off quietly. They found the pattern. Nathan climbed by stepping on whoever was beneath him, always confident the fall wouldn't reach him. Claire listened, collected, waited. And through it all, she rocked Rosie at night, humming the same lullaby. Rain would tap on the window sometimes, soft now like the storm had become a memory. Claire would look down at her daughter's sleeping face and whisper, "We don't do this for revenge, love." Her voice would shake, not because she doubted, because she remembered. "We do this because nobody gets to throw us away," she whispered. "Not ever again." The contract signing was scheduled like a performance. Ashford Tower, top floor. Press invited selectively, champagne flowing. Graham Ashford wanted witnesses. He wanted the city to see his reach. Nathan wanted the city to see his face. He stood in front of the mirror that morning, adjusting his tie, rehearsing his smile. Sienna watched from the couch, legs crossed, scrolling through her phone like she was bored by everything. "You look ambitious," she said, not quite kind. Nathan smiled. "Today changes everything." Sienna's gaze lifted slowly. "For you," she corrected. Nathan's smile tightened. He didn't know how to talk to Sienna when she wasn't being charming. She was a blade wrapped in silk. She didn't need him. She was choosing him, temporarily, because he was useful, and Nathan was too hungry to mind. At Ashford Tower, the room filled with high-level smiles. Nathan shook hands, accepted praise, laughed at jokes that weren't funny. When someone asked about his family, he chuckled and said, "Work is my family." People laughed like it was witty. No one asked further. Graham stood at the front, confidence pouring off him. "We are pleased," he announced, "to formalize a partnership with Monroe Dominion Group." The MDG side of the table was empty. Nathan frowned, a small irritation. He leaned toward Graham. "Where are they?" Graham didn't look worried. "They're coming. Chairwoman insisted. Nathan's pulse quickened. Chairwoman. The head. The real power. He imagined an older man, stern perhaps, or a polished executive. Someone he could impress. Someone who would validate him. Then the doors opened, and Claire Monroe walked in. For a second, Nathan didn't recognize her, because the mind rejects what it can't afford to accept. Claire moved with a different gravity now, not the gentle woman in slippers, not the tired mother in the storm. This Claire carried herself like someone who didn't need anyone's permission to exist. Her coat was black, tailored. Under it, a simple dress, nothing flashy. But the people behind her were the flash. A legal team that moved like a unit. Security that scanned the room with quiet competence. Mr. Alden at her shoulder like a shadow that protected. And Ms. Blackwood, eyes sharp, expression blank, already watching who would blink first. The room murmured. Graham's smile faltered, then recovered, forced. He stepped forward. Ms. Monroe? Claire extended her hand, polite, distant. Mr. Ashford. Graham's eyes narrowed in calculation. I wasn't informed of... You weren't informed because you weren't entitled to be, Claire said softly. Her tone wasn't aggressive. That was what made it terrifying. Nathan stood frozen. His chest felt too tight. Claire turned her head slowly and looked at him. And Nathan saw something that hadn't been there before. Not hatred, not anger. A kind of calm that comes after grief has burned itself out. Hello, Nathan, she said. His lips parted. Claire? Sienna's gaze snapped toward Nathan, suspicious. Graham's face hardened. You know my employee? Claire's eyes never left Nathan. He's not your employee for much longer, she said. Then she placed a folder on the signing table. It made a small sound, but in that room it sounded like a gavel. MDG is withdrawing from all negotiations with Pierce and Vale Capital, Claire said. Immediately. The air changed. The press leaned in. Graham's voice dropped. This is unacceptable. Claire nodded slightly as if he'd said the sky was blue. I agree, she said. Unacceptable is a useful word. She opened the folder. Inside were documents, summaries, legal language. Claire didn't show everything to the cameras. Underground power doesn't like the spotlight. But she showed just enough. MDG has determined Pierce and Vale Capital presents severe reputational and compliance risks, she continued. We will not expose our shareholders or partners to those liabilities. Graham's jaw tightened. This is an attack. Claire's gaze finally shifted to him. An attack is loud, she said. This is a decision. She turned back to Nathan. He could feel eyes on him now, investors, journalists, Sienna. Nathan's throat worked. Claire, what is this? What are you doing? Claire's voice softened, almost intimate, as if she were speaking only to him. I'm doing what you taught me, she said. Nathan blinked, confused. Claire's eyes flicked briefly to the contract line. You told me I was nothing, she said, so I learned how to be nothing. Nathan's pulse hammered. Claire's lips curved, not into a smile, but into something colder. Nothing makes no noise, she said. Nothing doesn't plead. She straightened. And nothing, she finished, is very hard to stop. Then she looked at Graham again, and her voice turned businesslike. MDG will also be reviewing all existing dealings with Ashford interests, she said. Certain regulators have expressed renewed curiosity. Graham's eyes flashed. Regulators? He repeated. Claire tilted her head slightly. Yes, she said. They called this morning. A lie? A truth? It didn't matter, because in Graham's world, even the suggestion of regulatory attention was a blade at the throat. Graham stepped closer. You think you can threaten me in my own building? Claire's gaze didn't waver. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't look to her security. She simply said, Mr. Ashford, do you know why my father survived this city for 40 years? Graham didn't answer. Claire's voice dropped. Because he never mistook volume for power, she said. A beat. Then she turned and nodded to her legal team. "We're finished here," she said. The press erupted into questions. Sienna's eyes narrowed at Nathan, disgust blooming. Graham's face remained composed, but his hands clenched, anger fighting calculation. Nathan watched Claire walk away. He wanted to move, to stop her, to explain, to plead. But he couldn't. Because for the first time in his life, Nathan Pierce understood what it felt like to be irrelevant in a room full of power. Claire reached the doors. She paused, not turning back fully, just enough to say something over her shoulder. "Take care of yourself, Nathan," she said quietly. It sounded kind. It wasn't. Then she left, and the room finally exhaled. The fall didn't happen in one dramatic crash. It happened in small, precise cuts. Underground power doesn't punch, it withdraws. Within an hour, Graham Ashford's office called Nathan upstairs. No warning, no softening. Nathan entered the corner suite that overlooked the river like a god's private view. Graham didn't offer him a seat. Sienna stood by the window, phone in hand, expression flat. Graham held the folder Claire had left behind. "Explain," Graham said. Nathan's mouth was dry. She's my wife, ex-wife. She was never—" Graham's eyes narrowed. "You didn't know?" Nathan swallowed. "No." Sienna's laugh was sharp. "Of course he didn't," she said. "He doesn't look like a man who notices anything except his own reflection." Nathan's jaw clenched. "Sienna." She cut him off with a glance. "Don't speak to me like we're equals," she said softly. Graham spoke again, voice dangerously quiet. "You embarrassed me," he said. Nathan stepped forward. "I didn't know she was—" "That's the problem," Graham snapped. "You didn't know." He tossed the folder onto the desk. "MDG doesn't just cancel contracts," Graham said. "They cancel futures." Nathan's heart pounded. "We can fix this," Nathan said quickly. "I can talk to her, I can—" Graham's gaze turned icy. "You will not speak to her," he said. "You are a liability." Nathan's breath caught. "Graham." "You are terminated," Graham said. The words hit like a blunt object. Nathan stared. "You can't—" Graham's voice sharpened. "I can," he said. "And I am." Sienna pushed off the window, walked past Nathan without touching him. She stopped at the door, looked back. "I thought you were useful," she said. "Turns out you were just convenient." Then she left. Nathan stood alone in the office with Graham Ashford's gaze drilling into him. "And Nathan," Graham added, voice lower, "if regulators come sniffing around, you will take the fall." Nathan's blood went cold. "You'll blame me," he whispered. Graham smiled faintly. "That's what you're for," he said. Nathan left the building with his world spinning. By evening, the first article hit. Pierce and Vail deal collapses amid compliance concerns. By morning, his bank called about a frozen line of credit. By afternoon, a former colleague stopped answering texts. Within days, his landlord asked about late payments. Within a week, letters arrived, legal notices, debt reminders, quiet threats disguised as polite language. Nathan tried calling Claire. No answer. He drove to the townhouse, forgetting he no longer lived there. The new tenant stared at him like he was crazy. Nathan drove to addresses he found online, Monroe estate listings, corporate offices. He was stopped at gates, blocked by receptionists, ignored by assistants who smiled like he was a child asking for a meeting with the Queen. Underground power didn't need to hurt him physically. It simply made the world stop opening for him. One evening, rain returned, thin and cold. Nathan stood under a streetlight outside the Monroe estate gates, hair damp, hands shaking. He watched the mansion lights glow through the trees like a distant, unreachable world. A car approached. The gate opened smoothly. The car passed through. Nathan stepped forward, desperation surging. "Claire!" he shouted. The car slowed. The window rolled down. Mr. Alden looked out, eyes calm, pitiless. Nathan's voice cracked. "Please, tell her I need to talk." Mr. Alden studied him for a long moment. Then he said, "You already spoke." Nathan swallowed hard. "I made a mistake." Mr. Alden's voice stayed even. "No," he said. "You made a choice." Nathan's eyes burned. "I didn't know who she was." Mr. Alden's gaze sharpened. "And that would have made it acceptable?" he asked. Nathan flinched. Mr. Alden's voice softened slightly, not kind, but truthful. "She didn't punish you for not knowing," he said. "She punished you for who you are when you believe no one important is watching." Nathan's chest heaved. "Tell her," Nathan whispered. "Tell her I'm sorry." Mr. Alden's expression didn't change. "I will not disturb her peace," he said. Then he added almost gently, "You disturbed it enough." The window rolled up. The car continued. The gate closed, and Nathan stood in the rain staring at a world that had decided he no longer belonged. Claire sat in her father's old office weeks later, Rosie asleep in a cradle nearby. The office smelled like cedar and paper and time. The city skyline stretched beyond the window, gray and vast. Ms. Blackwood stood near the desk, reviewing reports. "Ashford has begun damage control," Ms. Blackwood said. "He's offering scapegoats." Claire's gaze stayed on Rosie. "And Nathan?" Claire asked quietly. Ms. Blackwood's eyes flicked down. "He's being squeezed," she said. "Ashford will bleed him until the pressure releases." Claire's jaw tightened. For a moment she saw Nathan the way he used to be, laughing in small kitchens, hands shaking as he put a ring on her finger. Then she saw him on the doorstep, rain pouring, telling her she'd be nothing. Claire's voice was steady. "We don't destroy him beyond what he's already done to himself," she said. Ms. Blackwood raised a brow. "Mercy?" Claire shook her head slowly. "Not mercy," she said. "Boundaries." She looked at her daughter, tiny chest rising and falling. "I won't teach my child that power exists to crush," Claire said. "Power exists to protect." Mr. Alden entered quietly, carrying a folder. "Charity proposals," he said. Claire took it, flipped through. Shelters for women fleeing domestic abuse, legal aid funds, a program for mothers rebuilding careers after childbirth. Ms. Blackwood watched, unreadable. Claire closed the folder and exhaled. "This," she said softly, "is what I wanted all along. Not revenge, not applause. A life where she and her daughter could breathe." Outside, the rain finally stopped. Sunlight broke through, thin but real, spilling onto the desk like a promise. Claire stood and walked to the window, holding Rosie against her chest. Below, the city moved. Cars, people, ordinary lives intersecting with invisible forces they'd never name. Claire pressed her lips to Rosie's forehead. "You'll grow up knowing you're not disposable," she whispered, "no matter what anyone says." And somewhere, far from this warm room, Nathan Pierce sat in a small, rented flat, staring at a ring he couldn't afford to pawn because it wasn't worth enough. He listened to rain tap the window, and he realized the cruelest part of losing everything wasn't the money. It was the quiet. No calls, no doors opening, no one needing him. He had wanted elevation. He got isolation. Back in the Monroe office, Claire set Rosie down gently. She looked at her father's portrait on the wall. Harrison Monroe, eyes stern, mouth unsmiling. Claire spoke softly, as if he could hear. "I'm not your shadow," she said, "but I understand you now." Mr. Alden stood behind her, hands clasped. "You've done well," he said. Claire shook her head. "I survived," she corrected. Then she glanced once more at the skyline, the place where storms formed and broke. Her voice became a whisper, the kind that ends a story but stays in the listener's chest. "Some people think power is how loudly you can slam a door," she said. She looked down at Rosie, who yawned and blinked up at her mother like the world was safe. "But real power," Claire murmured, "is never having to knock." If this story stayed with you, if you've ever been underestimated, dismissed, or made to feel small, leave a message below. You're not alone in the storm. And you're not nothing, no matter who tried to name you that way.